Thank you, Leanne. Indeed, our next speaker, Jack McConnell, is going to tell you a story about digging into the well-being of his own community. Let me tell you a little bit about our next speaker while we set the stage a little differently. Jack McConnell retired as a physician and moved to Hilton Head, South Carolina, as so many others before him have done. And he looked around, he and his wife Mary Ellen, when they got to Hilton Head, and he found thousands of residents, neighbors, without care, the chronically medically underserved. And he found a whole group of physicians and nurses and volunteers with the time and the energy and the talent to do something about it. That's that incredible pool of volunteer ability that Lee Kaiser mentioned that is everywhere in our society and is the largest pool of talent ever assembled on the face of this universe. Jack McConnell did something about it against all kinds of odds that he'll tell you about. He created something called the Volunteers in Medicine Clinic. In your binders, there's an article from a national magazine on page 230 that tells you about the achievement. His clinic has become a model so successful that it's been studied and replicated in dozens and dozens of other states around this country because it dealt with so many of the practical, pragmatic issues of how do you get a volunteer clinic up and going. Now, as he will tell you, every person who lives or works in the Hilton Head area has easy access, not just access, but easy access to high quality health care. So Jack's point of view on this is that by transforming individual lives in the process, we transform our communities. Please join me in welcome Dr. Jack McConnell.
I'm here, David, talk. For the next few minutes, I want to take you through a journey in transformation. When my wife and I, as Steve said, retired to Hilton Head, we thought we had the world by the tail. We were going to play golf and tennis and bridge and travel and go sailing on Sunday afternoon. But what we hadn't counted on is that we believed the Chamber of Commerce brochures. If you move to Hilton Head, everyone is healthy and happy, and the world's going to be great, and you'll have no problems. We live there in relative wealth. We live in a nice house. We're not wealthy, but it's a comfortable house. But we exit outside the gate, the back gate of our community, into actual poverty. And it was that juxtaposition of poverty and wealth that prompted me to ask, why is this allowed to happen? Why doesn't someone do something about it? Being a slow learner, I must have asked myself that for 2 or 3 months, and then I realized I was indeed asking myself. So I said, okay, I'll do something about it. And I assembled a group of 29 retired physicians, and I said, why don't we give this care? Why don't we get together and do it? We'll sort it out somehow or other. But they gave me 16 of the 29 said absolutely yes, it's a wonderful idea. The other 13 had good and valid reasons why they didn't want to be involved in it. But they gave me 2 caveats. One was, I don't want my life savings put at threat to a malpractice suit. And the other is, I don't want to pay $1,000 and take an 8-hour test to prove I just drove across a stripe that they got in we call a state line. I didn't lose my experience or my talents or my interest or my compassion just because I drove across that line. So I said to myself, well, okay, if that's all there is. In fact, I said to them, we're off and running. We're in business. We're in good shape. What I didn't know, when I walked out that door, they were there for an additional purpose. There was going to be an ongoing CME, continuing medical education. When I walked out the door, all 16 said, it's a good idea, but nothing will ever come of it. We don't have to worry about that. Little did they realize. Thinking maybe that the malpractice insurance would be the more difficult of the two, I called the president of the South Carolina Medical Association and I says, here's what I plan to do, here's what I want to do, and indeed I plan to do it. How do you suggest I go about it? And he says, call a fellow named Cal Stewart, who is head of the Joint Underwriters Association. They insure 80% of the physicians in South Carolina. So wonderful, wonderful. So I called him and told him what I wanted and asked if I could come up to see him, and he said, sure. We had a nice long chat about it, and he says, Jack, I don't know how much coverage we can give you, but I'll tell you this. You will not have to, the lack of malpractice insurance is not the reason you will not open that clinic. Kind of a double negative, and I said, you mean I'm going to get it? And he said, Jack, I don't know how much it'll be, but you don't have to worry about it. To make a long story short, we now have unlimited malpractice insurance with a 21-year tail for all of our physicians, nurses, dentists, allied medical personnel, 240 volunteers for less than $2,500. We did have it for $5,000, and I talked about that was the first year we didn't have any suits. We talked down to $2,500. And so, you know, with this sort of strength to strength, I then thought, well, now's the time to go tackle the South Carolina Board of Medical Examiners. Not knowing them, I got a book. Every state has a book that has all the pictures of every employee in it or those who serve on committees. So I got a book, and I went over to the hospital and said, does anyone know any of these people here, and can you give me any insights into them, in case I happen to meet them in the hallway and a little small talk. And so they gave me some insights into them. And armed with that and the fact that I had heard that they were pretty hard-nosed, I decided to go on up. The youngest one, the lay member, the 66 years of age, which was the same age as I at the time. And they went from there up to 82. But I didn't have a chance for small talk. I walked in, and they were the one who was 78 had assumed the responsibility of telling me no. And he'd been practicing for a few days on that, I think. And so I said, now, sir, we have the problem of several thousand people with no coverage, and I was wondering if we might manage a waiver of the test and the fee, reducing that $1,000 in the 8-hour test, for those physicians who would like to give the services away free of charge. And I had barely said it when he says, well, that may sound like a good idea to you, doctor, but we aren't going to help you. Well, actually, what he said, we ain't going to help you, is what he said. And so, well, I said, I'm sorry to hear you're not going to, and I had to decide whether I'm going to say help or help. So I decided, well, I better stick with my own way of saying it. I said, well, I'm sorry to hear you're not going to say help. Could you tell me why? And he said, well, because, doctor, we just have to treat everybody the same in South Carolina. And I said, well, if that's the case, we're not working too well down in our part of the state because there are 8,000 people not getting any treatment at all. And he says, now, wait a minute now. You just turned my words on me there, doctor, and I don't like it. And I said, well, you're right, I did, and I apologize. I was just trying to make a point, though. But tell me again, why is it that you won't give us a waiver of the fee for these physicians just to give care to just to these people? And he says, because we have to demand this test and this fee in order to assure high-quality medical care in South Carolina. I said, have you been doing this long? Is this a tradition? He says, yes, it's been a tradition of South Carolina for years. And I said, well, then if that's the case, why is South Carolina in the bottom 3 states of the nation by any medical parameter you measure? And he says, now, son, it was nice to know I'd lost some age, but I wasn't getting too far. He said, you've done gone from asking to preaching, and I don't like it one bit. And with that, there was sort of an echo, because he would say, I don't like it one bit. Got down the line. And I stood there trying to gather my thoughts and thinking, well, wait a minute here. I'm the only one in this room speaking for the poor, and I'm not getting very far. And so I sort of said a little quiet prayer, and I says, I need help, what do you suggest? And while I was standing there shifting from foot to foot trying to figure out what to say, the one lay member of the group spoke up and said, well, I don't know why these doctors don't want to take that test. I took it and almost passed it. And I said, now let me see if I understand this, sir. Now, a test a layperson could almost pass is the way you assure high-quality medical care. Now, would you have given her a license if that had been? She says, now, wait a minute. We heard all we're going to hear out of you. We ain't going to help you. And you might as well get your hat and coat and get out of here. If you want to get anything done in this state, you got to go through the legislature. Good day, son. So good day, son. Little Sir Echoes down the way there. So I went up to him and told him, shook hands with Dr. Fredrickson. I wanted to bring you regards from Dr. Platt. He said you're one of the finest doctors he ever saw. And Dr. Avenel, Dr. Hite said he's consulted with you before and thinks you're one of the great doctors of South Carolina. And Dr. Vaughn, Dr. Marson says that he served with you on committees and it was a wonderful experience for him. And I went down the line there. And I got to the one at the end, and I said, and I want to thank you for the lesson you taught me today, and maybe we can talk again. Well, maybe so. Good day, son. And that was it. So it's a 3-hour drive and a long, I didn't realize it was that long, but it was a long drive because I knew I'd failed, and I worried about that the first hour. And I said, well, that's enough of that. Now let's review what happened today. And when I got to that part where they said, if you want anything done, you got to go to the legislature, I said, darn, those nice guys just told me how to do it. And so I put the foot to the pedal and I rushed home, and I got in time to call someone. And I said, do you know any member of the legislature who has an MD degree? He said, oh, sure, there's Dr. Trout. He's a feisty little so-and-so. And I'll tell you how feisty he is. He's the brother of the federal judge that is shoehorning that gal into the Citadel. I said, that's just exactly the feisty sort of guy I'm looking for. And so I called him that night, and I said, Billy, would you be willing to help me with this? And he said, sure, Jack, I'll help you. Sure. I said, what do you want? And so I said, well, here's where I need help now. I'm getting to get the hang of that thing. I just get right there with it. Now, the help I need is for you to just add one sentence of an amendment to a bill that's going through the House and the Congress and nobody's going to read and everybody's going to vote for. And he says, Jack, we ain't got nothing like that up here. We don't do that thing. I said, well, Billy, here it is. You're only in session half the year, and here it is, the 1st of April, and you're out the 1st of June, and you know those last 2 weeks of May, it's like feeding time at the piranha tank. You don't know what's going on. What are you signing there? He said, well, let me look around and see. So I gave him the one sentence. It says that the South Carolina Board of Medical Examiners shall promulgate by November the 1st regulations leading to the issuance of a special volunteer license with a waiver of all fees and all tests for those physicians who agree to give their services away free of charge in a not-for-profit clinic. And so I slowed down and read it to him over the phone there 2 or 3 times. And so he called me 2 days and he said, Jack, now just keep your head down and your mouth shut now. I says, does that mean you're going to help me, Billy? And he says, you just keep your mouth shut and your head down there. So I referred him to our representative and to our local senator. And sure enough, 2 days before the session was out, he called and said, come up next week and bring your bring your pen. We're going to have a signing session up here, Jack. And I said, good gracious, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. So we went up there and we signed it. after the session was over with, the governor signed it and he gave me the pen. And I waited 40 days and 40 nights. Something biblical about that, Lee. And I didn't hear anything from the Board of Medical Examiners. So I called them and I said, shouldn't we get together and talk about this? And they were mad as all Billy hell that I'd done it. They accused me of all kinds of things. I said, you snuck around there like that and did that on? And so I said, well, no, that's not exactly what it was. I mean, when I finally got them together, I said, I want to say how grateful I am to you for helping me how to sort this out, how to go. And I'm most grateful to you. And that was a very, very wise thing for you to do and very kind of you to do. And they said, we're not going to help you. I said, well, I'm sorry to hear that, because here it is. We've just got a few days left before you're going to have to write this thing. And they said, well, this was October the 28th when we got together the second time. And on November the 1st, they had to have the regulations. And I said, I'm sorry to hear you're not going to help, because I have these letters written to your newspapers saying what wonderful people you are, and what a wonderful thing this is, and how difficult this is, and how this is South Carolina is the first state in the nation to do this, and how the whole nation will look to you with pride and admiration. And you are the forefronters, and you've stepped out of the mold, and you've done something beautiful here. Still ain't going to help you. And I said, well, in that case, I've been advised by my attorney that November the 2nd, we're going to nail a notice on the door saying you're in conflict with the General Assembly of South Carolina and subject to a fine of $10,000 and 5 years in jail. I don't want that to happen to you nice people. I mean, let's just get on with it here. Well, they struggled and struggled with it over that 24 hours, and they finally produced it, and it's a good document. I mean, it's just exactly what we were looking for. What it did was to allow us to recruit, tap into a resource that wasn't being used. Steve was right. We now are a town that can claim, though we don't stand around doing it very often, that every person that lives there has an easy access to high-quality medical care. When we started, we had two problems. We had several thousand that had no access to health care. Does that sound familiar to you and your communities? Do you have communities like that? At the same time, we had several retired medical personnel that had no way to deliver it. So we brought those two problems together and made a solution out of them, which we call the Volunteers in Medicine Clinic. And the best part about it is, though, that we achieved that using two elements of society who had been rendered invisible and excluded. On the one hand, the poor sick, or the sick poor, and on the other hand, the retirees. Both of them discarded. But when you bring those two groups together, something wonderful and beautiful happens. I know traditionally that the physicians and the nurses are thought of as the caregivers, and the patients are the care recipients. But when you bring them together, it is at times absolutely impossible to tell who's the caregiver and who's the care recipient. We now have a new facility, 7,000 square foot, which we dedicated debt-free without a dime of federal, state, or local government money touching it. Now, I know our mayor when I say that, jumps up and says, we gave you the land. Well, that's not quite right. He leased it to us for 30 years for $1 a year, and in a fit of just pure reckless fiscal abandon, I paid the whole dang thing off on day one. And now it's ours. And then we recruited 40 physicians to work in it. We have 42 or 3 or 4 of them. 65 nurses, 14 dentists. We now offer adult medicine, pediatrics, immunization, ophthalmology, otolaryngology, that's ear, nose, and throat. Some of you don't know that. Cardiology, gynecology, urology, neurology, dermatology. I don't know any more ologies, but if we had them, we would probably have them in there. Orthopedics, psychiatry, mental health, social services, chiropractic medicine, absolutely, got them right in there. If they're licensed in that state to practice, I'm not going to pull a George Wallace and say you can't come in. And we're all learning something from each other. I mean, they're learning from us, we're learning from them. I'll tell you this, we have only 3% no-show on our return visits to them. Only 3%. How I wish our physicians could do that well. I don't mean to complain about the physicians. I mean to hold the others up as a way of giving them credit for it. We did have one or two physicians that had a little dust up about it, and it wasn't a month after that when I walked in and I saw one of them, and I said, "Charles, did you have a nice weekend?" He said, "Pretty nice, thank you." And I said, "My goodness, what's the matter?" He said, "I don't know. I got a crick in my neck. I've been like this. I've taken everything I can think about to take." I said, "Well, Dr. Henry's down there at the chiropractor. Why don't you go down there and see him?" He says, "Oh, you've got to be kidding. I wouldn't do that." So at least go down there and shake his hand and say howdy to him. So I was on my way out for lunch, and I passed the coffee room there, and I said, "Charles, how you feeling?" "Pretty good, pretty good." I haven't heard a word from him since, not a word. We all learn from each other. We're still in the process of learning that we don't know it all, that we don't have it all. In addition, we have dental health, dental hygiene, dental care, have an orthodontist on board, x-ray, laboratory, pharmacy, all of it free of charge. We don't charge anybody for anything. It's absolutely free of charge. We have a little 54-bed hospital. The first year of operation, we had 5,300 patient visits, a little over that. We saved the local hospital between $350,000 and $400,000. At the rate at which we are now seeing the patients, we're going to see about 8,000. We're going to have about 8,000 patient visits this year. That will be about 5,000 patients, I would think. We will save them somewhere in the range of $500,000. Lee spoke of doing well, doing good. You bet. And we're having the time of our lives. But the best part about it is, it's not that we did this debt-free, and not that we don't charge anyone. The best part of this clinic is that we have created a culture of caring that doesn't exist anyplace else. It doesn't exist in your hospitals or your clinics or doctor's offices or any place else. And it starts at the doorway. It starts it starts before on the other side of the doorway. How will we perceive that person that walks in that doorway? That's how it starts and when it starts. Because when they come in that door, we don't perceive them as patients or diseases or illnesses, and God forbid, charts. We view them as friends and neighbors who don't feel well and are coming over to us to see if we can help them. And we view them as friends, many of them we haven't yet met, but if we treat them with dignity and compassion and care and confidence, they'll be our friends. And they are our neighbors in one dimension because we all live and work in that same town. And in another dimension, someone asked 2,000 years ago, "Who is my neighbor?" Told the story of the Good Samaritan. And when they walk through that door, there's a greeter there to greet them, and his sole or her sole responsibility is not much more than 10 by 15 feet to let them know how nice it is, how sorry we are they're sick, how nice it is for them to come there. This is not our clinic, it's their clinic, it belongs to them, and please know how welcome they are. It's theirs. Come use it any time. I don't know what we've done that's going to endure. Well, the building will last a long time, but I think the most enduring feature is the fact that we are empowering this group of people to accept responsibility for the care through love. And love is far more powerful than law or regulation or insurance or anything else that you give it. And when they walk through that door, if they have children with them, then we invite them to house the children in a wonderfully decorated, like an aquarium, top, bottom, and sides, where the grandmothers are going to hug them and read to them, and when they leave, we insist that they take the books home with them. If they have brothers and sisters, take one for them too. If you don't massage the mind at the same time you are massaging the body, then you're only doing half the job. The grandmothers hug them and hold them and read to them, and we then take that wonderful friend and neighbor and we get that person logged in and then turn them over to their private escort who sees them through the registration process. It doesn't take long because we're not going to be, all we want to know is, do you live and work on the island? Do you have any insurance? What's the household income? That's about it. And those are the criteria. And then we seat them in the reception room. We don't have a waiting room. Now that's different. If things are what you call them. If you call it a waiting room, that's exactly what's going to happen. They're going to wait. But no one sits there 15 minutes without someone sitting down and visiting with them. If they're there longer than 15 minutes, somebody's sitting down and visiting with them. What we've done is to eliminate the glass wall syndrome that you and I have to put up with when we go to see a doctor. You walk into the doctor's office, little waiting room, too small, too hot, or too cold, and 7 people sitting there with a sad look on their face. And nobody speaks to you. And you walk over to this glass wall over here, partially glass wall, and there goes one. There's another nurse going by. Oops, there's a third. And then and finally somebody slides it back and asks, "What do you want?" You know? As if there were several reasons you might be there, you know. I said, "Well, I'm sick as a dog and I want to see the doctor," you know. And they say, "Well, you know, what's the matter?" Do I have to tell you here? What's the matter? Preparation H is not working, you know, or whatever it is. And then they want to know, have you got any money? I got a little. Here, fill that out and sit down. Now that's what you and I go through. Talk about intimidation. I'm intimidated in my own doctor's office, and I got the same union card he's got on the other side of that wall there. But what's happened? We have told that person, your opinion is not important. You don't have anything to say about it. We know it all, and we'll tell you, and you do it, or else. And only if you pay us. Woo, what a way to reach out to someone. What an awful way to reach out to someone. And you and I have tolerated that for years, and still are tolerating it. But we have eliminated that. When it's time for that person to go back on the linoleum, as we say, back where the care is given, they are escorted back with escort, and when they finish, then we have an exit interview with them. We want to know, how did we do? How can we improve it? Was this a good time for you? Do you need transportation? Episcopal Church, we got them energized, and they have created Friends with Wheels, and they'll come pick you up at your house and bring you here, and even take you back by the grocery store. You do your grocery shopping on the way. Have your children been vaccinated? Anyone else in the household that needs help? By all means, let's schedule them in now. And then the most important thing is going to happen next. Are more rare and often more therapeutic than a visit to the doctor. And what we have at the outset, we have representatives of 2 distinct and separate constituencies on the island, one fairly well off and one not well off at all. But what we have at the end are 2 human beings locked in a moment of caring and sharing, and that's where the healing occurs. The curing's back in the doctor's office, but the healing occurs there. And in the process, what we're doing, we are transforming the lives of those people, those friends and neighbors that come to us. We're transforming the lives of those who give the care. And by extension, we're transforming our town into a community. No town, not our town, not your town, not any town, can ever become a community as long as you leave behind a significant segment of the population in need of food, shelter, water, potable water, adequate sewage disposal, and a minimum basic level of health care. But ours is becoming a community. We're not there yet, but we will. I think it's captured best in our vision statement, which says, may we have eyes to see those who are rendered invisible and excluded, open arms and hearts to reach out and include them, healing hands to touch their lives with love, and in the process, heal ourselves. Thank you.